Thank you, Pastor John, Kara, Pastor Ashley. It's always good to be with you, be here back at Bologna. Isn't it good to be a part of God's family? Yes. Powerful worship, times of growing. It's just so good to be here. Pastor Jim King's always good to be in the room with you, sir. Thank you for your blessing on my life. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for men like you. God bless you. Like most kids growing up here in America, I grew up playing many a baseball game, many a ball game, and a whole lot of wiffle ball in my backyard. Any wiffle ball champions out there with me? We played cup ball, we played wiffle ball, we played anything with a ball. If we could invent it, we'd call it, we'd make it a game out of it. I fell in love with baseball at an early age. My dad was a lifelong Cardinals fan. At that time in history, I was at that point of life where you liked everything that your dad didn't like, and you didn't. So I was adamantly opposed to the Cardinals. I defeated them in my backyard in the World Series year after year after year with wiffle ball as we defeated them. And you know what it is. You guys have been there. When you were a kid, if you played it, you sat in the backyard and you acted out all the stuff. You ran around the bases that you had made out of pieces of paper. You swung as hard as you could. You did all the things that you needed to do. And kids grow up with the desire and to experience all of those things, and then for some lucky few, they turn into actual paying for college and then going on to propose. And can you imagine the day you actually were standing and you were playing in the World Series? It's the World Series. You've run this scenario in your head over and over. It's Game 7. If you don't know anything about baseball, see me later. I'll explain all this. The story will be way better. But those of you who love baseball, it's Game 7. Everything's on the line. It's the bottom of the 9th inning. This is it. This is the chance. There are 2 outs, and you come to the plate, and your team is losing 3-0. The bases are loaded. They're juiced. It's time. You walk up and you do all those idiosyncrasies and weird things that baseball players do that have nothing to do with baseball, but the guy before them had done that, and the guy before that had done it, and the guy before he had done it, and Babe Ruth started it. So you walk up and you tap the plate. You shimmy, which I won't do because that would be inappropriate in God's house. But you shake and you kind of twitch your head and you adjust your hat and you adjust all kinds of things. You're moving about. You're ready to go. You tap the plate. You step up and you're ready. You've watched game film. You know the bat swinging. You're ready. You pull it back when you're ready, and the guy pitches, and you read it right. It's a fastball. You've got him pegged. The seams, you can count them as the ball is turning towards you. And you swing with all your might, and you make contact. You feel it hit the sweet spot of the bat, but you know something was just a little bit off, and you see it shoot out. Your heart begins to soar. Everybody begins to cheer, and it's about to go out, and then it just sort of fades foul, and you're like, shoot. So you step out one more time, and you got to begin the thing all over again. You got to touch your knees and your everything. The crowd behind you gets into it, and they suddenly begin to chant your name over and over and over again. Randy. The crowd begins to chant your name over and over again. You people aren't getting it. The crowd begins to chant Randy. Like, first service was way better than y'all. I'm just saying. I feel like I'm in kids' church. We need to say, we're better than first service. The crowd begins to chant my name. Thank you for achieving a bucket list in my entire life. No one's ever chanted my name. It is incredibly weird. If you're new here to church today, yes, we are not a cult that's focused on me. But you're swinging, you step up, you know exactly what he's going to do. He pitches the second pitch, you're waiting for it, you see it, everything goes in slow motion, you swing, you make contact, but again, foul ball. Now it's 0-2. 2 outs, bottom of the ninth, bases loaded, down 3 runs, everything. You begin memorizing and remembering all of those things you did with that yellow wiffle ball bat that you had when you were a kid. Every coach, everything. You look to the stands, you see your wife standing there. She's glowing as the sun hits her. You're a natural. Everything is looking great. It's all good. You see your dad sitting in the stands. Your mom can't watch. He's crying. This has been the moment. Your baseball card is about to become 5 times more than its value. Everything is happening. You're ready. You're feeling it. The adrenaline's here. Everything goes. The guy pitches, and you see it. The ball is coming one more time. It's a fastball. You know exactly what to do. You swing, and your eyes close at that moment as you feel the rush, and you hear the smack. And you realize it is not the ball that has hit the bat, but it is the ball that has hit the catcher's glove behind you as you have swung and you have missed. The crowd erupts, but it's the wrong side of the crowd. Strike three. The game is over. You're a loser. A few months ago, you watched as the Mega Millions lottery jackpot hit $1.3 billion. So you bought a ticket or two. You started dreaming of all the things you would do with $1.3 billion. I'm not even sure I can fathom $1.3 billion. I can fathom a lot of things to spend it on, however. In fact, you'd already had a plan. You knew what you were going to buy. You've thought about it. You knew all the stuff. Maybe you were going to buy a new car. Maybe you were going to buy a new house. Or this looks like a new shopping mall. You were going to buy new clothes. You were all in. You're like, okay, God, if you'll let me win the lottery, I will tithe 25%. I'll give you a quarter of it. That Friday, some of you anxiously sat on your couch waiting for the goofy guy to come up and start announcing the numbers because you'd heard there was a winner. You got your ticket out and you're looking at it. You could barely contain your excitement as you're looking at it. And he started announcing, and as he did, 13, 36, 45, 57, 67, 14. You jumped up off the couch and looked at your ticket and realized not a single one of your numbers had been called out. You're a big loser. Dave Ramsey was right. Don't spend money on the lottery. Everyone dreams of success, don't we? We talk about winning. We want to win the big game. We want to get the big job. We want the promotion. We want awards. We want plaques. We want those kinds of things. We want them for ourselves. We want them for our kids. No one wants to be a loser. You don't dream of, like, when I grow up, I want to be a drug addict. Like when I grow up, here's what I want to be arrested. Like, that's my goal. I want to be arrested. No one dreams of failing tests or missing assignments or missing the big shot, botching the presentation. When I was working on this message, I wrote in here a line, no one wants to really be a Razorback fan for their lives, and then last night happened. No one wants to be a loser. No one dreams of that. If it was a dream, it was more of a nightmare than anything. When you're growing up, you had pictures and posters on your wall. At least I did. When you put up a poster, did you put up Muhammad Ali or the guy who ran away from a fight and cried? Did you put a poster up of Michael Jordan, maybe? I had the one where his hands were outstretched wide. Or did you get the guy who never played anything other than playground basketball? Maybe your hero was Amelia Earhart. Would you look to her or the guy who couldn't fly a plane off the ground? Did you have a poster, a picture, or do you have one of Tom Brady or the guy who gets drafted last, Mr. Irrelevant? So did you look up to Neil Armstrong or the guy who threw up every time he got on Southwest Airlines? Apparently there's a poster of the guy who pukes on airlines. Serena Williams, maybe she was your hero. She's one of mine. Did you idolize Serena or the middle school tennis coach who's doing it just so he can make an extra $50 a week? No, we choose the people who win. We choose the people who succeed. We dream of being like a champion like them. You don't idolize or look to the leaders, the losers of histories. You look to the leaders. You want to be like them. Instead, we learn from winners. We learn to imitate them. What was their strategy? What did Serena do? How did Michael Jordan do that? How did they train? What did they do? What actions did they do? How can I replicate what they did so that I can make sure that I can replicate their success? Studying winners is a smart move. I hazard to guess that if we talked to any of those leaders, Tom Brady, Armstrong, those other people, they had looked to others and imitated them as well. They applied the lessons they learned. But you can also learn from people who failed. You can learn from losers. Why? Because losers also had big dreams. They also had plans. They also had goals. They wanted to win the big game. They had practiced. They tried to succeed, but instead of achieving their dreams, they didn't. You've heard the famous quote. Winston Churchill said, those who fail to learn from the past are what? Doomed to repeat it. If you don't learn from those who've lost, if you don't stop and pause for a moment, those who failed and messed up, you run the risk of making the exact same mistakes. You see, our goal as a church is to be a lifelong follower of Jesus Christ. I want you to follow the Lord every step of your journey, every day of your life. I don't want you to have one moment of walking away. I don't want you to be a loser, but I want you to accomplish God's plan for your life. I want Jesus to be the center of your life and Jesus to be the center of this church. I want you to know that God has plans for you and your family. God has amazing plans for every person in this room. God's big plans and amazing plans are out of control, over the top, amazing, and will transform you and your community and your world. I want you to achieve God's plan for your life. I don't want you to lose. I don't want you to fail. But if God has a plan for every single person in this room, if God's plan for every one of you is to achieve his plan and his goal for your life, why do some people fail? Why doesn't everybody do it? Because if God wanted it to happen in your life, why doesn't he make it happen in your life? Why do some succeed? Why do some fail? There's a lot of reasons. But we do get some clues in the Bible. You see, the Bible is our guidebook for living. It's full of stories of great men and women of God who did incredible things. But it's also filled with stories of men and women who did stupid things throughout their whole lives. And we read and we study about Jesus, the greatest champion of all time. We try to emulate him. But the Bible also tells us stories of people who failed. And their stories are not so we can be like them. It's so that we absolutely won't be like them. Men and women who missed their chance, the losers. And over the next few weeks, we're going to look at the life of maybe one of the biggest losers in the Bible. A guy who seemingly had it all. Everything was going the right way. And in a very quick time, he moved from winner to loser. We'll look at his mistakes so that you don't repeat them and that I don't repeat them. And his name was Saul. The story of Saul begins in 1 Samuel chapter 8. Samuel was this great prophet of the Lord. Samuel was God's man who had everything what he did was God chose him, put him in place, and he lived his life and was a blessing and did all these things. And then he was getting older and he was getting to the point where he couldn't lead Israel. So he had 2 sons, and so he chose his 2 sons to be the next sort of spiritual leaders and guides over Israel. The problem was those 2 sons were immoral, corrupt, and were bad. And it wasn't like they were hiding it. Everybody knew it. 1 Samuel chapter 8, verse 4. So all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah, and they said to him, "You are old." What a way to begin a conversation. Hey, I just want you to know, you're old. And this is not very honoring, but at least they're just calling it like it is. You are old, and your sons do not follow your ways. Now, appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have. The people of Israel wanted a king. After all, they didn't want these 2 jokers to lead them because they were obviously bad. So in one sense, they're not doing the wrong thing. It's easy to look and say, these corrupt guys, we don't want them in charge, but we trust you. You're going to have to give us a king. We want a king because all the other nations have kings, and that seems to be working out for them. This was their plan. It wasn't God's plan. It wasn't God's idea. This was their thing they had come up with. Can we get a king? Samuel knew this was a bad idea. You do not want a king. God agreed. God didn't want them to have a king either. God wanted to be the king of Israel and send his prophet, not to have a man to lead them. So God told Samuel, I want you to warn him. Tell him, don't do this. This is a bad idea. Tell him what's going to happen. They said, if you get a king, bad things are going to happen. So Samuel told him, if you get a king, this is what's going to happen. Verse 11, he will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and his horses. Then verse 14, he will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves, and then he'll give them to his attendants. Just kind of summarizing it, Samuel looked at him and said, you want a king? A king's going to take your kids, and he's going to put them in his army. He's going to use them for what he wants to do, and you're not going to see him again. You want a king? He's going to invent taxes. And he's going to take the best that you've got, and he's going to expect you to work for him, and he's going to take the money. And he's not going to take the leftovers. He's going to take the best. They're going to belong to him. Samuel says, you want a king? You're going to suffer. You're going to get persecuted. Your kids are going to be slaves, and it's going to cost you a lot of money. Now, if I had been there and heard all that, I would be like, okay, no deal, no deal. Sorry, that whole suffering pain thing, I don't have a good pain tolerance. So, king, just kidding. Don't need it. I'm good. We were just messing with you. We'll take your boys. Come on, anything. What do we got to do? That's not what happened. Verse 19. But the people refused to listen to Samuel. No, they said, we want a king over us. Then we'll be like all the other nations, with a king to lead us and go out before us and fight all our battles for us. It's interesting. Everything bad that happens in Saul's life and in Israel's life from here on out could have been avoided if they just listened to God. Like, this is really not a whole lot to do with today's message, but if they had just, at this point, said, okay, God, we'll go with your ways, all the rest of this mess wouldn't even have happened. Samuel even told them, listen, when you get that king and when that day comes, you're going to cry out for relief from the king you've chosen, but the Lord will not answer you on that day. That's a tough one, because we like to talk about God who answers prayer. That's a pretty tough sermon, the day God doesn't answer your prayer. But right here, he said he wouldn't answer it. And I've seen it a bunch of times. Somebody is about to make a choice. They're about to decide to do something. They're working their way to do something, and they get advice from their pastor or their spiritual leader or someone they trust. They even get a word from God of what to do, and then the person does what they want to do anyway. They ignore their pastor. They ignore their Sunday school teacher. They ignore their parent. They ignore the spiritual leader. They do their own thing, because after all, they know better. And then they do that thing, and then they do it, and the consequences come. And then they come, and you know what they say? Why did God let this happen to me? And God's like, I had nothing to do with this. They blame God for not protecting them and keeping them safe, when God said, if you go there, this will happen. They don't turn on God. They turn on their parents. They turn on their pastor. They turn on their leaders. They say, why didn't you tell me what to do? And you're like, I didn't think you were serious. Listen, when God warns you about a decision, don't go through with it. When you get clear messages and words from the Lord, don't blow through the warning signs. Dumb choices lead to dumb results. In fact, I got a word from God for you today. You get a pen out. You get your hand out. This is kind of a bonus extra one. This is kind of a point for later. Like, this is like summarizing it up. This is deep theological truths. Like, every now and then, Dr. Randy Jumper likes to come out. And today, Dr. Randy Jumper's coming out right here. After all my studies of Scripture, here's one huge important takeaway when it comes to following Jesus. Don't be dumb. 3 words. Don't be dumb. It would save a lot of people's problems. But dumb Israel, guess what they did? They wanted a king. And God relented and said, okay, if you want to be dumb, you can have a dumb king. Verse 22, the Lord answered, listen to them, and give them a king. And who would that king be? It was King Saul. Now, even though you've heard the stories, if you've grown up in church about him, and we've preached a lot about, we really don't know a whole lot about Saul. He only just shows up every now and then in the story. We don't have a lot of details about his life. We know he ruled from around 1050 to 1010 BC. He was the son of a guy named Kish. Kish was a wealthy Benjamite. He's one of the wealthiest men in the area. According to 1 Samuel chapter 9, Saul was tall and handsome. Saul was the ideal candidate for a king, and I guess for a boyfriend. He was rich, strong, tall, and handsome. He was liked and respected. He's the guy you pick. He's the guy you choose. He's the guy you want. He was not a loser. He was a winner. In fact, he was a major winner. Life had been good for Saul at this point. He's the guy you wanted your daughter to date. Good family, good looks, good money. Where is my kid right now? And I want to introduce him to Saul. Then one day, Saul's out working for his dad, and he runs into Samuel. Saul's dad, Kish, was a farmer, had a lot of land, a lot of property, and apparently a lot of animals. He had a herd of donkeys, and the donkeys run off. This is probably another sermon for another day. But these donkeys run away, and Saul goes looking for his dad's livestock. And he's out searching for the herd of donkeys. When on the road, he runs into Samuel. Samuel sees Saul, and Samuel says, hey, man, the donkeys will take care of themselves. Come eat with me. I want to have dinner with you. So they eat dinner. And then after dinner, Samuel says, hey, I want to talk to you privately. I need to talk to you. Verse 27, as they were going down to the edge of the town, Samuel said to Saul, tell your servant to go ahead of us. So the servant did. All right, this is private. This is just me and you. He said, just stay here for a while so I can give you a message from God. Now, suddenly, this whole thing takes a different turn. Saul just got out of bed that morning and was going looking for donkeys. Now he's having dinner with Samuel, the great prophet of God, and he's sending away the servant, saying, I got a word from God for you. This was not what he had planned. It's like going to dinner with running into Pastor John down at Harps. He says, hey, come on, let's go over here. Let's talk. Let's have some dinner. And then you sit down and says, now I want everybody wait because I got a word from God for you. You're like, what did I do this week? Does he know about that? I mean, all this stuff. Samuel looked at him and said, you're going to find your dad's donkeys. Don't worry about that. That's going to happen. But as that happens, you're going to experience this incredible miracle, and you're going to see something you've never seen before. Then, I want you to do this. I want you to go down to Gibeah. It's another town. And when you get there, your life is going to be changed. Verse 8, as you approach the town, you'll meet a procession of prophets coming from the high place. The Spirit of the Lord will come powerfully upon you, and you will prophesy with him. You will be changed into a different person. Once these signs are fulfilled, do whatever your hand finds to do, for God is with you. That's some pretty intense stuff for running into a random guy on the road that day. At the end of dinner, before you go, instead of saying like, hey, see you later, thanks, cool, post this picture on Instagram, we'll see you later. It was like, talk to you later, have a great week, hope everything's good. This is like, hey, no nice trip from Samuel. It's you're going to be the next king of Israel. And you're going to find the donkeys, and you're going to prophesy. And that's exactly what happened. Samuel went through this process, all that stuff, and then Samuel's next instructions were very important. They were so important, I'm going to slow down, I'm going to read them carefully so you make sure you don't miss it. He says, now, go down ahead of me to Gilgal. I will surely come down to you to sacrifice burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, but you must wait 7 days until I come to you and tell you what you are to do. Basically, it's this. All these amazing things are going to happen. You're going to be the next leader. Everything's going to be great at Gibeah. And then go to Gilgal, wait 7 days. And then I'm going to show up, and we're going to have church. I'm going to prepare a sacrifice. We're going to worship, and we're going to bless you. And from there, that moment on, it's going to be catapulting moving forward. God had a plan for Saul. God's anointed king of Israel, and he was going to be the man. He was the one who was going to accomplish great things. And that God's plan for Saul was not to be a loser. God's plan for Saul was to be a winner. God's plan for Saul was to be a champion. Not only did God have a plan for him, God told him what the plan would be. If you're like me, half the time God gives you some indications, but he never lays out the specifics. Saul got the specifics and didn't obey them. Verse 9. What a powerful verse of Scripture. Saul turned to leave Samuel, and God changed Saul's heart. And all these signs were fulfilled that day. Don't you love it when God grabs a hold and changes someone's heart? We serve a God who reaches down inside of where you are, and he changes your heart. Up until this point of the story, this is the kind of God we serve and the kind of plan that he has for it. I don't care what you came in this building with, what you did this week, what you plan on doing tomorrow. When God decides to grab a hold of your heart and transform and change it, when you open up to him and surrender and say, here I am willing to stand in your plan, to walk in your ways, to live how you want to. God will reach into your heart and transform and change it. Everything Samuel said happened. And then there was this meeting. All the different leaders of Israel got together. They confirmed that Saul was the king. Everything was great. And he headed to the place that God told him to go, to Gilgal. Now, at this point in the story, the stage is set. Everything is right. It's all the way. Saul could have been the leader. Saul could have been the hero. He could have been the guy, the first king of everything. Think about it. We always love the first people to do something, the first person to do that. After all, some of the greatest presidents the United States has ever had. Well, who's the first president we ever had? George Washington. We know he's great only because he's the first one. He could have been a horrible president. None of us really know. But he was first, and he's the right one. Well, the first guy, the first person who accomplishes it, the first person who does something. This could have been Saul, but Israel is not known for King Saul. It's known for who? King David. In fact, it's known for who followed him, not for who he set up to lead. You see, he was the opposite. He failed. Instead of being the hero, he became the loser. How did he go from winner to loser? It all began at Gilgal. What I left out part of the story, Gilgal is where the enemy was. It's really fascinating. The very first thing that God told him to do was to go where his enemy was. He said, you're the king. Now go to Gilgal. The Philistines, they're the bad guys in the story. This is where they are. And so Saul went and he got there and he saw an outpost of Philistines. And after all, God had told him, or Samuel said, well, do whatever your hand says to do because God's with you. And he saw the Philistines. He had the soldiers of Israel with him and they gathered together and they attacked and they beat these guys. And it was a quick victory really fast. And he's like, I'm feeling it. I am the man. This is great. And that was good. But then word spread amongst the Philistines. There was just one hornet and he kicked the nest. And guess what happened? All the Philistines showed up. Chapter 13, verse 5. The Philistines assembled to fight Israel with 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and soldiers as numerous as the sand on the seashore. They went and camped at Michmash. Now, Saul's attack on the Philistine outpost went pretty good. Now the whole army is ready for a major battle. All those men and showed up when he was the king, like, we got a king. This is going to be great. We're going to be a great king. We're going to have celebrate. It's going to be awesome. Great king. Love the king. Go king t-shirts. They're there. They're ready. They join the army. We win one battle. Go king again. Awesome. We've got a king. Oh my goodness, there are thousands of people coming our way. Guess what happens? When the Israelites saw their situation was critical and their army was hard pressed, they hid in caves with thickets. Quick, burn the king t-shirts. That's what they did. They hid among rocks. They hid in pits and cisterns. Some Hebrews even crossed the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. That's like saying they went to the other side. They were like, we're joining the Philistines. But Saul remained at Gilgal, and all the troops with him were quaking with fear. Again, it's another sermon for another day, but be wary of the people who chant your name on Monday but run from you on Tuesday. The pressure was on. The Philistine army was massive, and Saul and the Israelites were afraid. But remember what God had told him? Go down ahead of me to Gilgal. So he was the place he was supposed to be. And I will surely come down to you to sacrifice burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. But you got to wait how many days? 7 days until I come to you and even tell you what you're to do. Yes. See, even though things were scary and the odds were stacked against them, Saul was right in the middle of God's plan. Yes. This wasn't a surprise to God. He knew what was going to happen. And Samuel had given him specific instructions to wait until he showed up. I know this makes sense to us, but you need to know this. It can be scary in God's will. You see, in our minds, we think, if I'm doing what God said, then everything's going to be great. Like there's going to be like comfort and blessing and rainbows, maybe a unicorn. It's going to be great. But often God calls us to places of challenge, anxiety, and fear. Did you just say God called me to places of anxiety? Absolutely. God puts us in places where we have to depend on Him, not ourselves. Yes, obedience leads to blessing, but obedience also takes us to valleys so that we can climb the hilltop to see how great it's going to be. It's true that God will be with you, but it's also true that God will place you in places where you need Him to be with you. It isn't dependence if you don't need Him. That God's plan will lead you to scary moments. In fact, I just sense that there's somebody right now that you've been questioning whether you obeyed the Lord because things have not gone right. It hasn't worked out. It hasn't been the way you thought it would be, and you expected it to be home run, everything going right, and it's not, and you're questioning whether or not you made the right choice. Hear the word of the Lord. He has you where you are so that you can watch Him. So here's what we know. Everybody look up here. Here's what we know. The Spirit of the Lord speaks to us, and He challenges us, and He helps us We don't want to be in a place where we're outside of God's plan and God's will. Are you with me? We want to be right on target, right on where he is. God's timing is better than our timing. Saul was officially in panic mode. And on some level, I kind of cut Saul some slack. After all, what has his soldiers done? They ran. They took off. They took off. They were like, they came to assemble. They were ready to go. But instead, they moved. They ran. And he's like, what am I going to do? And so then Saul did what he shouldn't have done in verse number 9. He took the matters into his own hands. Bring me the burnt offering and the fellowship offerings. And Saul offered up the burnt offering. Now, it's interesting. Saul does worship, and worship gets him in trouble. He does spiritual things outside of the sequence and the plan and the order of God.
That's it.
And it's the first lesson we learn from Saul's life. Losers are impatient.
Yes, sir.
The dictionary defines patience as the capacity to accept or tolerate, delay, to go through trouble and do not get angry or upset. Being impatient means you don't have those things. Now,
Yes.
some of you have met my wife, Heidi. Heidi is one of the most patient women you'll ever meet. She is even-keeled, steady, rock solid. Doesn't matter how bad it's going or how good it's going. She's the same. People are mean to her. She responds with grace and understanding. When things go wrong, she's calm and peaceful. When her husband does something stupid, which is really rare if you think about it, she navigates that with grace, and I'm grateful for it. On the other hand, I'm not the most patient person in the world. I'm the king of switching and avoiding lines. Anybody else do this? If there's a long line and I'm in it, and I'm in line number 3 and it looks like 2's moving faster, guess what I do? I quickly move to 2. But if 2 slows down and 3's picked back up, I'm going to switch back over. I will actually spend more time switching lines. If I just stayed in line, I would go through it. Anybody ever been mad when you switched line and saw the person in front of you accomplish something faster than you did? And you just blame Satan. You're just ticked as you go, like whatever. It's because you're impatient. I don't like getting put on hold. If I call a company and I'm hold more than 30 seconds, I get annoyed. I've given up talking to the cable company. It's no longer my responsibility. My wife is patient. She gets that responsibility. There can't be that many people waiting to talk. Anybody ever been to the DMV? I don't even go into pages. You got it. I'll also confess to you all, I'm part of one of the many people in the world who, I'm not much of a cook. If I cook, it involves McDonald's or a microwave. That's functionally when I'm responsible for cooking. But I'm also the person, when you put something in the microwave, when there's 3 to 5 seconds left, you know what I do? I go ahead and just open it. There's no reason why. Anybody else you'll be on it there. Look at all these hands. Like, what could that 3 seconds actually do? Like, those 3 seconds, like, once we get to 5, that's just kind of gravy. That's when the popcorn burns. Like, that's the last 3 seconds. Really, what's the point in that? But I'm like, I'm saving electricity. I'm saving my family money by getting it quicker because I want it now, right? Apparently you and I are not alone. A study recently revealed that 96% of Americans knowingly consume extremely hot food or drink that burns their mouth. Everybody else confess, I'm a person, I know it's hot. I did it on the way here drinking coffee. I'm like, if I drink this now, it's going to be hot. Oh my goodness. Anyway. 63% of these people who do it, they also do it frequently. More than half of people hang up the phone after being on hold for 1 minute or less. I know we have an officer here this morning. 71% of people frequently exceed the speed limit to get to their destination faster. Just leave that stat up here. There's another one that says that 29% of people lie about not speeding, but that's neither here nor there. Nearly a third of people who are ages 18 to 24, they will wait less than 1 second before bypassing a slow-walking person in front of them, specifically at the mall. What causes us to be impatient? We get impatient when the pressure is on. When you got a deadline, you got to accomplish something. You got to roll with it. You get impatient when your expectations aren't met. You said to meet at 6 o'clock. It is now 6:04. Where are you? You get impatient when you don't see results. You've worked out every day for the last 2 days, and you still haven't lost a single pound. You're like in the mirror looking for abs. You can't find one ab anywhere. This isn't working. You get impatient when things don't happen the way that you think they should. There was a plan. The plan wasn't working. So you're like, what do? We got to just take over and do something ourselves. You get impatient when money is tight. You've been taught God blesses obedience. We talked about it. But for some reason, your bank account just doesn't seem to grow. You seem to be challenged. And then you see everybody else on the take. You see everybody else benefiting. So you do some of the same thing. It's just a little money you're taking from work. You're just a little bit of lying that you're doing in your expense report. After all, everybody else does it. You're dating this person. You're in a relationship. You've moved past dating. You're in a relationship, and you love them, and they say they love you. You know what God said about waiting until marriage to have sex, but you say, well, we love each other, so it's probably okay, right? That's what happened to Saul. Pressure was on. Things were stacking up. Samuel wasn't there. It was day 7. He couldn't wait any longer, so he abandoned God's plan. He did it himself, and in this moment in the movie, that's when the movie soundtrack takes on an eerie bent, because you know, don't do it, Saul. Saul, don't do it. You know what's going to happen, and as he begins the sacrifice, you hear the bum, 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 bum. And just like your mother when you were 13 years old and you were doing something you shouldn't do, verse 10, just as he finished making the offering, Samuel arrived. And Saul went out to greet him. What have you done? Asked Samuel. Now, I wasn't there, but I have heard that so much from my parents, I know how he said it. And then watch how Saul replies. When I saw the men who were scattering, and that you did not come, and that the Philistines were assembled around me, I thought. Now, I know most sermons and most points, this would be a good place for me. Most of the time, I'm telling you, you guys need to think about what you're doing before you do it. But some of you need to stop thinking. Because losers think my plans are better than God's plans. They start thinking through it. They just start thinking, God didn't mean this. God couldn't have said this. I see it all the time. One detail in their plan doesn't fill out the way it wants. One thing they didn't like. One thing fell apart. And so they say, well, God's abandoned me. God's cut everything out. I don't have to do anything. God just left me on my own. Well, your impatience leads you for you to take control. When you take control of God's situations, what you're ultimately saying is, I'm God.
That's it. Amen.
And the more we talk about Saul, the more you realize this is his core issue. His impatience and his lack of trusting of God and his demand and desire to always be in control. Yes. Saul was arrogant. He actually thought he knew better than God. So he blamed the people. He blamed Samuel. He blamed the Philistines. And now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the Lord's favor. So I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering. And a little bit of tinge in there as he blamed God. Saul probably didn't feel compelled to honor God. He probably felt overwhelmed and stressed. His people were leaving, the enemy was mounting, and it wasn't on his timeline. And to save face with Samuel, he made up some sort of lame spiritual excuse as to why he did it, to save face in the moment. And that's what losers do. Losers make excuses. They blame everybody else. They will dress up their reasons in spiritual words. I can't tell you how many times people have done sinful things and said, God told me to do it. They make all kinds of excuses. Well, I was going to do it, but they pressured me to do it. Like I wasn't my only choice. Well, I was afraid. So I had to do it. Well, I didn't know it was wrong. I learned it from my parents. Well, I'd rather do the wrong thing than nothing, which is really great logic if you think about it. Probably the most famous one, the most foolish one. I wasn't going to do it, but the devil made me do it. You see, losers push the blame on someone else, or they make up a reason why what they did was justified. I wouldn't have acted this way, but my parents did this to me. I wouldn't have made this choice, but I was conditioned by my grandparents. I wouldn't have dated this person. I would have done this. It's a generational curse. I'm stupid because everybody was stupid before me. I get that there is impact. I get that there is influence, but at the end of the day, you and I have to stand before God for our own choices and our own decisions. We decide to take it into our own hands and make the sacrifice. Samuel was furious. Saul's actions were going to have major consequences. And that's what we learn. Impatience leads to foolish decisions and terrible results. You get impatient in traffic, you tailgate the person in front of you, you whip through traffic and you speed. The result, you caused a wreck, you get a ticket, and you still end up later there.
That's it. Amen.
You get impatient with your staff or your team. They're all scrambling and working. So what you do is you take it over yourself. You rush through the work. You cut corners, and you make mistakes. It costs your company a ton of money, costs you maybe your job, and it makes your staff mad at you. You couldn't wait any longer for God to give you the right boyfriend, so you found one on your own, and he's a dud. He's a jerk. He's lazy and mean and pushed you to cross your own boundaries, and you're like, you wanted the perfect church. The one that met all your preferences, kept you hopping from one place to the other, always trying to check something out. You want to look for the right thing in the right room, with the right mood, with the right song, with the right preacher, wear the right clothes. But you kept going to place after place after place. Now you aren't connected to church at all, and your kids are grown, and they don't go to church at all, and you wonder, why don't they connect somewhere?
Amen.
You see, rushed decisions rarely result in success. I look back over my life, and my biggest mistakes and moments were when I did something too quick, too impulsively, and too fast.
Yes, that's the truth.
What were the consequences for Saul? Verse 13, you have done a foolish thing. You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now, your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him ruler of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command. In a stunning moment, Saul goes from God's chosen man to about 7 days later to God's rejected man. If you think about the flag of Israel, it has the Star of David on it. I know we didn't happen, but it could have just as easily been the Star of Saul. If he had obeyed God and fulfilled God's plan and his promise, Saul would have been remembered as the hero. Instead, his impatience cost him everything. Don't be like Saul. Don't be impatient. I've made a lot of jokes and a lot of fun today, but here's the lesson to walk away with. Trust God's timing.
Yes, amen.
Don't get in a hurry. Don't force things to happen. I know you thought it was all going to work out. You've been coming back to church. You've been doing your own thing. And you're like, I've tried so hard. Like, I know I wasn't doing great before. My marriage was struggling. I own the fact that I screwed up, but I've been trying to do right. I've been doing all the right things. How come my marriage isn't better now? How come my husband isn't responding? I've been trying. Just wait. You say, well, I've been coming to CR, but I've been 6 months sober. It's been amazing. I'm doing outstanding. But I thought by this point I wouldn't be tempted. I wouldn't want to drink. I wouldn't want to drug again. And you say, when is that going to go away? Obviously, God's not with it. My word for you is just trust God's timing. Keep going. You say, well, I've been paying my tithes. I've been doing the right things financially. I've yet to open my mailbox and there be money falling out of it. I can't seem to get ahead. Why can't I get things to go right? Trust God's timing. Keep doing right. There's a scripture in Galatians chapter 6. It's a little out of context, but it speaks powerfully to what we're saying when it says this: let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not what? Give up. Don't give up. keep doing right. Keep doing the right thing. Keep moving forward. God has not forgotten you. God has not abandoned you. God's promises are still true. God is still working on your behalf. You have not seen the victory now, but victory is on the horizon. Don't take matters into your own hands. Don't take control. Release it to God. Watch Him move at every step of the way, causing great things and good things to happen in your life. Saul's instructions were to wait. And I think the Lord sent me here today to tell you that it's time to wait. To wait and watch what the Lord is doing. Would you stand with me? Rather than leading you in an altar call or causing you to raise your hand or asking you to come to the front, the response to today's message has less to do about this moment and everything to do with every moment this week. The Lord wants you to wait. Release the thing you've been trying to control and watch as the Lord does more than you can in a moment than you can do in a lifetime. Would you allow me to pray and bless you? Heavenly Father, I pray that your Spirit would be real and magnificent, and that, Lord, you would make some things happen in the lives of men and women in this room. They have wondered when it will happen, and I pray, God, two things. First, I pray you will make it happen, that you will bring them the victory that they've sought. But secondly, I pray you would give them the patience and the courage and the stamina to wait upon the Lord and trust your timing. Lord, we don't want to lose. We want to win. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate you coming out. As always, if you would, please look around, find somebody you don't know very well. Make sure you shake their hand, tell them you love them, you appreciate them. Shake a hand, hug a neck. Don't forget, CR is at 5:30 today. God bless you, and we will see you Wednesday night.